Welcome. From today we are going to start with the nervous system, and I hope this session would prove to be productive for you. Nervous system is like all of the body systems. It is said that we have almost 11 systems running inside our body. Well, this is what we have been told. One of those systems is the nervous system. The nervous system, on the basis of the functional components, is classified into two types. That is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So let's begin with the types. The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is composed of brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system basically includes the nerve components which are responsible to carry the information from or towards the central nervous system. Alright, so they basically includes the cranial nerves, the spinal nerves, and the ganglions. Okay, we are going to talk about them right in detail, but we are going to begin with the central nervous system. Let's talk about the brain and the spinal cord. The spinal cord as a structure will be discussed in the upcoming sessions. Right now we are going to talk about the brain, alright? And in nervous system we are going to talk about the central nervous system first. Okay, the central nervous system, as we have already mentioned, I already have mentioned before, that is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. However, we are not going to do the spinal cord today, but let's talk about the brain, okay? The brain is basically composed of three parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Basically, during the development, three major swellings are appeared for the formation of the brain. We have named those swellings as the prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon, which are also known as the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. All right. So let's see what are those components. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and in between the two, the part which is basically separating the brain and the spinal cord is the foramen magnum. All right. Don't forget about that. Now let's talk about the three swellings that I mentioned earlier. That is, we have the topmost or the most prominent swelling, which is known as the forebrain, or it is also known as the prosencephalon. Okay. Then we have the mid swelling, which is known as the mesencephalon. Then comes these three swellings, right? Now they are termed as the rhombencephalon. This is the general description about the components of the brain. Now let's talk about a little more detail about it. The forebrain, the uppermost swelling, which makes up the maximum part of the brain, or the prosencephalon, is further divided into two parts. It has got further two components, you can say. The first component is actually present on the cortical area. Okay, that is the outer surface of the brain. It is also termed as the outer surface of the brain or the cortex of the brain. This cortical part is basically known as the telencephalon. Okay, so this has further two components that includes the telencephalon, which is actually the outer cortical part, and then we have deeper structures lying within it. They are termed as the diencephalon. The telencephalon, what are the components or the structures which are actually appreciated in the telencephalon? That is actually, it is basically composed of the cluster of the gray matter. Simple. It has got the gray matter, the bundle of gray matter, which is basically concentrated on the outer surface, which is termed as the telencephalon. Then comes the diencephalon. Again, in the diencephalon, we have got certain collections of the gray matter. They are not spread throughout. In fact, we have got some collections of the gray matter present in spaces. Okay, there is a distance between these spaces. And so, for example, for the examples for the diencephalon, the structures for the present within the diencephalon includes like thalamus, epithalamus. These are all the gray matter. Okay, metathalamus and the subthalamus. We have hypothalamus. Okay, and many more. All right, let's talk about the midbrain. The midbrain or the mesencephalon is said to be a bridge between the prosencephalon and the rhombencephalon, that is the forebrain and the hindbrain. It is a very small component of the brain, and it acts as a bridge or a connection between the upper part of the brain and the lower part of the brain. Okay, so the mesencephalon exactly does not hold any for the components, but we do divide the midbrain into different parts. That is the anterior, the middle, and the posterior part, which is termed as the crus cerebri, tegmentum, and tectum. And in between the crus cerebri and the tegmentum, we have substantia nigra, tectum. Now let's talk about the rhombencephalon, or the hindbrain. Now, can you actually appreciate three most important things here? The three most important components, or the swellings. This swelling, which is, or this component which is present behind the pons, this is pons, this is medulla bistructure, and this is your cerebellum. Alright, we have midbrain, and then we have cerebrum, which is also known as the forebrain. Okay, now this pons, the cerebellum, and the medulla, they make up your hindbrain. However, this hindbrain is further divided, just like the forebrain is further divided into two parts, metencephalon and the myelencephalon. Now, the components which are included under the metencephalon includes the pons and the cerebellum. Okay? So the pons and cerebellum are included in metencephalon, whereas the medulla oblongata is included in the myelencephalon, or is named or termed as the. Okay, so these are the different components of the brain. Okay, now this talem basically includes cerebral cortex. So this is the general description, or you can say the division of the components of the brain. Okay, now I would like to add in something here. The brain, within this brain, there is another system which is running, very successfully running within the brain. Okay, now that system is termed as the ventricular system. Every part of the brain has got its own component of the ventricular system. For example, for the telencephalon, we have the lateral ventricles. Okay, I will just draw this out. Okay, we have the lateral ventricles for the telencephalon, not the prosen, but the telencephalon has got the lateral ventricles. Okay, now these lateral ventricles opens up another ventricular cavity which is known as the third ventricle. So diencephalon is associated with the third ventricle. Okay, this is lateral ventricle. Okay, now this third ventricle empties into the, or it continues as a ductal as it passes through the midbrain, which is known as the cerebral aqueduct. So the midbrain has got the part of the ventricular system which is present in the midbrain is termed as the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, and then what happened as cerebral aqueduct goes down towards the pons, it basically splits up and opens up in like a big chamber-like structure. Okay, now as it passes downward, it again narrows back into a canal. Okay, this diamond-shaped structure is formed between the lower part of the pons and the upper part of the medulla. This is known as the fourth ventricle. So this fourth ventricle is basically the part of the rhombencephalon. Okay, and then as it narrows down, as it the fourth ventricle, as it goes down, it tapers, it narrows and forms a canal which is known as the central canal. And as this central canal passes through the foramen magnum and basically continues into the spinal cord, it is termed as the central canal of the spinal cord. Okay? So this is how, and within this ventricular system basically runs a fluid which is known as the cerebrospinal fluid. And this cerebrospinal fluid is basically responsible. It acts as the media, a transport media, simply just like the blood. It also acts as a transport media. Okay, so this was about the brain. And now let us talk. We're not going to discuss the spinal cord right now. However, we are going to discuss this in the upcoming sessions. Okay, and now let's talk about the peripheral nervous system. But before starting with the peripheral nervous system, what exactly is the function of the central nervous system? Central nervous system is basically holds all the memory and all the information. It basically not only holds, but it also responsible. It acts as a memory cap. You can feed as many memory as you want, and it also has its previous memory, which is transmitted from the ancestors and all that. So basically, this is a processing system, and also the information which is basically carried from the peripheral nervous system or by the peripheral nervous system enters into the central nervous system. It is integrated, it is processed, and considering the past memory, or if it is the fresh memory, then or the fresh information, then it has been stored within your memory, and then in response to that, it produces the response or the action, and that action is again carried out from the central nervous system, towards the effectors again via the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system works in coordination. Okay, the central nervous system possesses all the information and integrates all the information and produces the response, or you can say it identifies the stimuli, it processes the stimuli, and it creates the response. But how that stimuli has entered into the nervous system and the response or the order which is carried from the central nervous system towards the effector is by the peripheral nervous system. Okay, the peripheral nervous system, as mentioned earlier, is basically responsible to carry the stimuli from the receptor towards the central nervous system and carries the response or the order from the central nervous system towards the effector. This is your peripheral nervous system. So on the basis of the type of information it is carrying, it is classified clearly into two, right? Information it is carrying is classified into two, that is the sensory peripheral nervous system and the motor peripheral nervous system. Okay, let's begin with the motor first. Okay, for example, you have received some stimuli from you have received some stimuli and you have to produce a response against that stimuli. Okay, in response to that stimuli you have to produce some replying. Okay, for example, you have received a stimuli. Okay, for example, you have received a stimuli, and in response to that you can produce two types of actions. Either it will be in your control or the voluntary response, or it may not be under your control, which is termed as the involuntary responses. For example, if you just so like your mom is cooking in a kitchen a very, very yummy dish, which is your most favorite dish, and you just received the smell. Okay, you cannot help yourself control your hunger cramps in response to that particular food. However, you can control yourself not to go into the kitchen and peek into the food, alright? Yet it is also not under your control when you are badly hungry. However, you need to complete your work and then you are allowed to go to the kitchen or to the dining room to have your lunch. Okay, so we have got two types of responses, that is the voluntary response and the involuntary response. So motor responses can further be classified into voluntary, which is also termed as the somatic response. Okay, so the voluntary response can also be termed as the somatic motor response. Why it is known as the somatic motor response is because the voluntary action basically involves the skeletal muscles, the movement of your body, the contraction of the muscles, especially your skeletal muscles. Okay, so therefore it is termed as the somatic motor response. Okay, they basically include the skeletal muscles. Then we have the involuntary responses. These involuntary responses is basically involving two major type of muscles, especially that includes the smooth muscles and the cardiac muscles. They're totally not under your control. The autonomic responses is also included, or they're also included in the involuntary responses. Okay, so involuntary is actually which is not under your control, under your will. Okay, it is also termed as the autonomic response. For example, in response to the same stimuli, to the same smell of the food, the salivation begins within your mouth. Okay, so that is also not under control. You doesn't order your salivary gland to release the saliva. It is totally not under your control. Okay, so let's talk about the sensory responses. Now, what type of stimuli, or you can say the receptors, are basically receiving the informations? Which type of informations are those? There are such informations which are general. General means like almost all part of the body can experience that. For example, pain, the sense of touch, vibration, pressure, they can be appreciated by almost every part of your body, right? However, there are certain stimuli or certain sensations which cannot be felt by every part of your body, every inch of your body, but we have got certain special organs which are responsible to receive that particular sensations. For example, your eyes have got special type of receptors which are responsible to produce the vision, okay? Like your tongue, it has got taste buds. Your tongue has a capability to receive the taste, okay, of any food which is basically entering your mouth. Of course, the function of the tongue cannot be carried out by your ears or your eyes or your hand. You do not actually, I'm sure, none of you can actually understand the taste of the food by touching it. Can you? You cannot. You have got special type of receptors which is present in your tongue, or which are present in your tongues, okay? These are not present in your hands, of course. Trust me. Okay. So the sensory responses on the basis of the type of sensation it is receiving, the type of stimuli it is receiving is classified into two. That includes the general sensation, okay, and the special sensations. Alright, in special sensations we have, for example, vision, which is basically controlled or is carried out by the rods, which is this function is specially carried out by rods and cones, which is present in your eye. Then we have hearing. We have got the vestibular system, which is present in your ear. Then we have taste, which is basically carried out by the taste buds present in your tongue. And then we have smell, the most important thing, that is actually carried out by the auditory pathway. The olfactory pathway, which is basically present. We have got certain chemical receptors present in your nose, okay? We're going to talk about all these in detail in the coming sessions, okay? Let's talk about the general sensation. Now, this general sensation is it's been divided into further two. How and why? Basically, the sensation of pain which is experienced by your external body surface is different from the pain sensation which is carried out or which is felt when you experience the pain in your viscera, like your organs. For example, simple, your stomach ache is different. Your pain in the stomach is different from the pain which occurs in your external external body, or you can say the external surface of the body, okay? Like if your skeletal muscles get hypertrophied or it gets any damage, so the pain which is experienced by this skeletal muscle is different from the pain which is experienced by the organ present. Somatic general sensation and the visceral is basically arising from the skin, okay, from the subcutaneous tissues, okay. Example for the general sensations, and of course the locomotory organ parts and all that. Example includes the sensation of pain, touch, vibration, pressure, and so on. Whereas the visual sensation, the visual pain or the visual general sensation, which is basically felt by your viscera, by the organs which is present inside your body, okay, includes your abdominal cramps, you can say, alright, the abdominal distension, okay. So this was the peripheral nervous system, a general description about the peripheral nervous system. Now, I'm going to discuss about few terms which are basically included in this peripheral nervous system, especially in the central and the peripheral nervous system both. As we all know that the structural and the functional unit of the nervous system is a neuron. And neuron, I'm not going to go into detail of the neuron, however, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the neuron. It's very important. Okay. Each or every neuron has got two components, okay? That is actually the nuclei, or you can say the soma, and its long process. Now, every neuron is composed of the nucleus, the cell body, not exactly the nucleus, we call this as a cell body or a soma, and a very long process. This long process is actually the nerve. Okay? And now this nerve can be, excuse me, myelinated or unmyelinated. Okay? So, if I draw number of nuclei, this area is now termed as the gray matter. Okay? The area which has got cluster of, or you can say abundant of the nerve cell body or the soma is termed as the gray matter. And then each nerve cell body is giving out the long processes. Now these long processes are termed as the white matter. We have got two more terms which are associated with the gray matter, named as the, okay, before naming them, I would like to explain you something. We have got, what are these? Remember I told you about the telencephalon. This is your prosencephalon, this is your mesencephalon and the rhombencephalon. The prosencephalon has got further two parts, that is the telencephalon and the diencephalon. Okay, remember what is the telencephalon? What was the telencephalon? That is the gray matter which is present, or you can say the cluster of the nuclei, the nerve cell body or the soma present on the outer surface, the cortical surface. That is your cerebral cortex. Okay, this cluster of the gray matter which is present on the surface is termed as the cortex. We have got two examples for the cortex that is present at the level of the cerebrum, that is your cerebral cortex. Number two, which is present at the level of the cerebellum. So that means the cortical area of the cerebellum again has got abundant, or you can say a great mass of gray matter. Then we have another most important thing. Remember when I told you what I told you about the gray matter? The gray matter gives rise to what? The processes, of course, not the gray matter in fact. The gray matter gives rise to the white matter, you can say that. So similarly, we have got numerous of the number of, you can say, nerve cell bodies running present here. So that means we have number of tracks which are basically passing all the way from up to down, and this is actually your white matter. For example, within this white matter, sometimes you can actually appreciate a small bundle of the gray matter, maybe quite a number of amount of the gray matter, or you can say the nerve cell body. So here now the small bundle or small group of the nerve cell body are not called as the cortex, but they are termed as the nucleus. Simple, a small group of the nerve cell body present or found within the white matter. So we have got the nucleus. Example for such nucleus, we have the cranial nerve nuclei. We are going to talk about each and everything in detail. Now let's talk about the white matter. It's very important to talk about the white matter. Since we know the information from the receptors enters into the central nervous system, right? And from here it goes to the higher centers, okay? And then it gets integrated and all that, then a response is formed, and again it goes out to the effectors, right? We all know that. Can you actually appreciate the, now this nerve fiber or the power which is present outside the nervous system is known as the peripheral nervous system. The part which is basically present within the central nervous system, the tract fibers which are present within the nerve system are being classified into further types. Alright, so the white matter on the basis of the information, not exactly the type of information it is carrying, but the information which is carried from one part of the central nervous system to another part of the central nervous system, they are being classified into different types. For example, if the information which is being carried from the lower part of the central nervous system to the higher centers, or vice versa, that is from higher to lower, before it gets out into the peripheral or becomes a part of the peripheral nervous system, those fibers are termed as the tracts. Okay, so on the basis of the direction of the information which is taken from lower to higher and higher to lower, they are termed as ascending or descending tracts. Okay, so we have You know, the cerebrum is a very large part of the brain. The brain is composed of two cerebral hemispheres, and those two cerebral hemispheres are interconnected via a bundle of, again, white matter or the fibers which are running from one cerebral cortex to another in order to provide both the cortex with the same information, the same amount of the information. So, the fibers which are basically interconnecting the two cerebral hemispheres, they are termed as the commissural fibers. The largest and the well-known commissural fiber is known as corpus callosum. This was a connection between the two cerebral hemispheres. Now, considering one hemisphere itself, this is your frontal area, that is anterior aspect, and this is your occipital, your posterior aspect of the brain. So the association fibers are those fibers which are connecting the different regions within the same cerebral hemisphere. Simple as that. So we have the third type of fibers, which are white matter, which is present within the central nervous system, that includes the association. Now I would like to explain another term here which is very important and you may come across in the upcoming lectures. As you know, talking about the tracts, you know, as the tracts, as they goes up towards the higher center, especially towards the cortical region, can you actually appreciate how they have made the diversions, or you can say they have radiated out? Initially they were basically running in a convergent form, alright? They were very, very narrow bundle. They were making up the very narrow bundle, and as they reach towards the cortex, or they push towards the cortex, they radiate out. So the tracts, as they reaches towards the cerebral cortex, they no longer remain as in a tract or a bundle form. In fact, they radiate, or they dispersed out, and therefore they are termed as the radiation, that is the corona radiata. So these are actually also termed as the corona radiata, and they are the example of the radiation fibers. What are actually the radiation fiber? They are not a different type of fibers. They are not a separate fibers. In fact, they are the continuation of the tracts. Simple. I guess this is it for today. If you like the video, so please subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss the future lectures. See you soon with another topic. Thank you for joining me.